Welcome back. You're watching The Globe. Now, as we observe World Polio Day, we look at the life of a sportsman who's a polio survivor and now a polio advocate in South Africa. Div Louw's personal story tells of his great triumph as a polio survivor, keen to create awareness on polio and also encourage people to go beyond limitations, including the physical ones. Louw is a classified PTS-3 triathlon athlete. He contracted both spinal and bulbar polio. The latter destroys neurons, causing respiratory or cardiac failure. Before we have a chat with Div, let's take a look at his incredible journey. Well, Polio Ambassador Div Louw joins us now via Zoom. Div, thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program, and thank you so much for giving us time to share your story.
Oh, it's such an amazing moment in time, really, to be able to share on SABC News on Polio Day. Is almost like a dream come true. To be a polio ambassador, to be associated with Polio Plus, member of my hometown Benoni Rotary Club, and one of a family of para-triathletes is just amazing. It's to be able to celebrate that this evening is such a privilege. Thank you very much.
No, thank you so much indeed. We're going to talk about your story just now, but let's start with World Polio Day because it is a disease that we actually don't need to still have in the world.
That is so true. And, you know, I've been thinking about some of the mentions about celebrating Polio Day. I think we're reminding each other of polio that should not have been. It has to be eradicated. Can be. Yet we see a surge in new cases. We see that there's a resistance against vaccination once more. It's just one of those amazing situations where we need to remind each other we cannot take our foot off the pedal now. We are so close, so close. And yet polio is but a handshake away for us here in Africa. Really, it is.
So as an ambassador, what is your message? What do you go out and preach to the world?
You know, when first I came back from Egypt after my first venture there as a para-athlete, I came back and I felt that I needed to bring hope to disabled people. I felt that I needed to bring hope to polio survivors specifically. And when I arrived back home, I looked for a partner, came across Rotary International, and I knew I had found before. So what I do is I tell about polio, the reality of it. I call it the true polio story, because I had as bad as what polio can be thrown at me, and yet survived. And other than the romanticizing the fact, one has to remind one another that it may not have happened at all had I had the polio vaccination. I was less than a year too early in contracting the disease. And today we need to tell one another that vaccination is one way to prevent polio from spreading. Polio spreads, and we see these rise in cases where vaccination have taken a back seat, where people are resisting vaccination. In New York, I was surprised the other night to hear that the vaccination rate is less than 30%.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
Wow.
And here in Africa, we are far more positively orientated towards it, but we have bad social and other circumstances. We have droughts and war and famine. We need to take notice of the fact that we can warn each other against polio, but we must also prevent it from spreading by supporting efforts like Polio Plus that funds polio vaccinations, especially here in Africa. And that is the story I have to tell. Is let's go and do it. Prevent polio from spreading, and for once get rid of it. It's the best thing that we can do. It should not happen to anybody. Polio, once it gets hold of you, it stays with you forever. After 70 years, I can tell you that's a fact. It never leaves you. And it takes off the best that you have to give. When you compete, like I did in Agadir, we had a rainy day, first time in 3 years, wonderful. But polio took off the top. Off that couple of minutes that I needed to come in below 2 hours.
All right, so let's talk about your incredible story, because, you know, getting polio so young, and this has been a lifelong journey. You've chosen to rise above it as much as you can and thrive. That must take some kind of mental fortitude in part. And I just want us to understand why you chose to thrive, why you chose to embrace the sport, and despite the odds, stand up.
Perhaps it's fitting to start at the beginning, because when I contracted polio, it was somewhat like it is with COVID these days, it wasn't acceptable to get it. So we were kind of shamed by the fact that you had it. So we kind of stayed in the shadows. And I specifically remember quite well that I tried to be unnoticed in the areas of physical activity, because I really, you can imagine at 4 years you don't really know much what have come over you. So we kind of stayed in the shadows, and we tried to not to be noticed. That's probably the first and the most important awareness I have. Yet, in other areas in life, you were almost forced, and you felt like fiercely competing in order to make up for what you lose in the physical regime.
Right.
So what had happened was that only in the 90s, when I ran into problems and polio came to take its toll again, I was diagnosed in those days what we call now Pretoria Academic Hospital by a Prof. Ben Lotz and his clinical assistant with having post-polio syndrome. And for the first time in my life, I was told what exactly polio had done to me. So it started getting a kind of a personality, in that what they told me was that what polio had taken away from you, and in those areas that polio affected most, post-polio syndrome meant that it was so depleted in its efficacy, these neurons in your brain stem and your spinal cord, that you started to show the symptoms of weakness, of difficulty breathing, and the rest of it when you present with post-polio syndrome symptoms. That, of course, having said that, I had to call it a day, and I returned back from an international circuit in an international chemical company, and I decided to take it on again on an intellectual basis. So I fought it because I couldn't really, I was expected to be wheelchair bound soon. I decided to give it another go. That lasted until about 2010. I ran into difficulties again, and that was the most amazing moment in time, because MRI technology had by then been rolled out, and we saw images of what polio had done to my inner body. So it not only then hinted what it was, I could actually see what damage it did to muscles, to even some of the lesions in one's brain. And at that moment in time, I realized if I could see it, I can fight it. And I'll fight it not intellectually like I did before, but we'll fight it physically. And that brought me to a team of medical specialists, a biokineticist, an orthopedic specialist, and a neurologist. And we decided we're going to give this thing a go. Hydrotherapy helped me develop muscles which was weakened, and that supported those that were paralyzed. I started walking well again. I swam, and I joined. By that time, parasports was something of a fashion, and spoken about. So I joined the para sports. I had medical reports to be classified, and I then decided this is the way to get this thing beaten once and for all. I was going to give it a go. So
Yeah.
that's how I ended up with a triathlon, a para-triathlon family. Wonderful people, amazing.
What a wonderful story it has turned out to be. Thank you so much. I wish we could talk for longer, but sadly run out of time. But thanks for joining us and sharing your inspiring story. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, that's Div Louw, polio ambassador, lifelong polio sufferer, but he's one that's thrived and overcome his limitations and using it to inspire others. All right, let's take a break, and when we come back,